Good morning, everybody. It's about 8:15. I'm just quickly shooting into my office here in Warkworth to print out a few pieces of paper and deal with a couple of emails before I head off to the airport later on this morning so that I can get back down to Wellington for what is the Parliamentary Week. Now, as just talking about, just to continue on around policy areas, and again, my apologies for not being able to post 2 or 3 days last week, but honestly, the number of engagements that are coming into our offices and the number of people that are wanting to see us, how it's stepped up in this election year is phenomenal. So I guess people are believing that we're going to have influence at the end of this year. So now a lot of people want to see us that haven't seen us for a while. So that's really interesting. But and I also spent, just to touch on as well, I spent an amazing day with some teachers, primary school teachers, at an NZEI sort of workshop, just talking about ways that they can better use the time when they're in front of MPs, candidates, people who are going to try and be their MPs during this election campaign. So that was really valuable. I had a great time. It was wonderful. On the Saturday, Ria Bond and I had a day's workshop with New Zealand First women and some friends. So they weren't all members of New Zealand First. There were some younger ladies there that had came along. They'd seen me and known me from doing some work or from my time as the chair of Mahiringi College. So they came in to be part of a discussion about reasons why women don't put themselves forward. Sometimes men worry that when women get together, all we do is talk about them, and actually we hardly talk about them at all. We were talking about what it is that stops us as women putting ourselves forward into those roles. How can we as women be more supportive of others to help them step up into those roles? And then we had a conversation around some policy that I'm developing that specifically has some downstream positive effects for women here in New Zealand. So that was a great day, 6 hours, 6 to 7 hours of just connecting up with some really smart, involved, connected women and getting their view. So that was great, really enjoyed it. So Ria Bond and I and all those other women. But I got a phone call yesterday around Auckland Kindergarten's situation, where Auckland Kindergarten is now having to, and I'm sure they're not the only kindergarten association that is having to revalue all the time frames with which they work to meet what is a modern work environment. And I want to be really clear, this is a modern work environment, not a modern educational environment. So the reason why Auckland Kindergarten Association is having to do all this is because of the lack of funding. It's because of a government that believed that you didn't need 100% trained, registered and qualified teachers inside early childhood. You only needed 80%. And they used that to cut funding to early childhood education. I want also to be really clear that early childhood education is not childcare. So there should be a very definitive line between what is affordable childcare and what is early childhood education. But that line has got more and more faded and more wiggly as this government has stayed in power. So I did this radio interview yesterday just to put out the perspective of New Zealand First with regard to early childhood education. And from the New Zealand First perspective, we would, not only do we believe that there should be 100% trained and qualified teachers inside an early childhood education centre, because to understand how the importance of the development of oral language and how oral language is developed, and then how oral language flows on to written language, it's something that you need to spend time training to learn. It's not something that you can just dump a person in front of a whole group of 4-year-olds and they're just going to know it by osmosis. So firstly, we believe in 100% trained, registered and qualified teachers inside our early childhood education. And we certainly don't believe in this push on our families to put their children into care as early as possible because they're required to go out to work. And then to have this privatisation and this competition inside the early childhood sector. We believe, again, if the government recognises that early childhood education is valuable to children and therefore to the nation because of downstream positive effects, then the government should take the responsibility for it and make sure that its delivery is there, sustainable and equitable across the country, so that every New Zealand child can access the level of early childhood education that the state themselves believe they should have. And that's not what's happening at the moment. The government is providing cash, it's taken its hands off the wheel and said the market will decide. Parents can have choice, even though the reality is that wealthy parents get choice. Parents who are poorer, who have to go to the one closest to them, or the one, the childcare that they can access quickly, or on the huge number of hours that they have to work, don't have choice. So that's where the state has a role in making sure that there is the equitable, sustainable, and at a high quality provision across the whole of New Zealand, no matter where our families are. Right, so that's us for this morning. I better get on. Bye.